Again, welcome to Slepmonk. Today we dig deep into 19th century of America. Before proceeding further, if you have not subscribed, then do it to get more stories. Asterisk, you wake before the sun. Not because you want to, because the building wakes you. The pipes groan, the floorboards creak, the baby next door cries. The man upstairs coughs. The woman below stirs her pot. You are inside a tenement in New York City, 1884. It is 5 stories tall. It holds over 100 people. It was built quickly, cheaply, and without much thought for comfort. You live in one room. You share it with your wife, your 2 children, and your brother. There is no running water. There is no toilet. There is no insulation. The walls are thin. The air is thick. The morning begins not with silence, but with survival. You light the stove. It is coal-fired. You keep the coal in a box near the door. You ration it carefully. Too much, and you'll run out before payday. Too little, and the eggs won't cook. You boil water. You make tea. You fry bread in lard. You eat quickly. Your wife wraps the children in wool. She checks their shoes. She braids their hair. She hands them a tin lunchbox that they will walk to school. It is 6 blocks away. They will sit in rows. They will recite lessons. They will be quiet. You were taught that childhood is carefree, but this one is structured. You step into the hallway. It smells of cabbage, coal, and damp wood. You pass neighbors. You nod. You do not speak. You descend the stairs. They are worn. They are slick. They are dangerous. You reach the street. It is loud. It is crowded. It is alive. You walk to work. You pass pushcarts. You pass horses. You pass men shouting in languages you don't understand. You were taught that cities are modern, but this one is improvising. You work in a printing shop. It is dim. It is hot. It is filled with ink and paper. You set type. You load presses. You carry stacks. You do not speak. You do not rest. You do not complain. Your hands are stained. Your back aches. Your ears ring. You were taught that work is progress, but this one is repetition. At noon, you eat. You sit on a crate. You unwrap bread and cheese. You drink water from a tin cup. You listen to the men around you. They talk about rent. They talk about illness. They talk about the price of coal. No one talks about dreams. You return home at dusk. The streets are darker now. The gas lamps flicker. The air smells of smoke and sweat. You climb the stairs. You enter your room. Your wife is sewing. Your children are reading. Your brother is asleep. You eat soup. You wash with a basin. You sit. Quietly you were taught that evenings are peaceful, but this one is crowded. You hear the buildings settle. You hear footsteps. You hear arguments. You hear lullabies. You lie down. You close your eyes. You listen. The tenement does not sleep. It hums. It breathes. It waits. You were taught that homes are private, but this one is shared. What kind of life unfolds when every wall listens? The morning rush has passed. The streets outside are still busy, but the tenement itself has settled into a different rhythm. It is not quiet. It never is, but the sounds have changed. The clatter of boots on the stairs is less frequent now. The hallway smells less of frying bread and more of damp laundry. Some rooms are empty, their occupants gone to work. Others are full, their occupants working from home, though no one calls it that. You are one of the few who return midday. Your shift at the printing shop is split, and you have an hour before the presses start again. You climb the stairs slowly, feeling the weight of the morning in your legs. On the second floor, a door is propped open. Inside, a woman sits at a sewing machine, her foot pumping the treadle in a steady rhythm. The fabric piles beside her are bright reds, blues, and yellows, but the room is dim. She does not look up as you pass. Her work is paid by the piece. Every glance away from the needle costs her. On the third floor, a boy sits in the hallway with a shoeshine box. He is polishing his own shoes, waiting for customers to come in from the street. He is no more than 10 years old. His hands move quickly, confidently. The rag makes a soft, repetitive sound against the leather. You nod to him, he nods back. No words are exchanged. In the tenement, conversation is a luxury. Your own room is warmer than you expected. The stove has been lit again. Your wife is boiling water for laundry. The steam fills the air, making the walls sweat. She has already scrubbed the children's clothes in a wooden tub. Now she wrings them out, one by one, and hangs them on a rope strung across the room. The rope sags under the weight. The clothes will take hours to dry. You eat a small lunch, bread, a slice of cheese, and tea. The bread is stale, but the tea is hot. You eat slowly, not because you want to savor it, but because there is nothing else to do before you must leave again. From the window, you watch the street below. A cart passes, piled high with coal. A man shouts in a language you don't know. Two women argue over the price of onions. A policeman walks by, his baton swinging at his side. The street is a stage, and the actors change constantly. But the script is always the same. You leave again for work. The afternoon light is thin, filtered through the haze of coal smoke. The air tastes metallic. You pass the same pushcarts, the same storefronts, the same faces at the printing shop. The presses are already running. The sound is deafening. The floor vibrates under your feet. You take your place and begin again, setting type, inking plates, stacking pages. The work is mechanical. Your hands know the motions without thought. Your mind drifts. You think about the rent due next week. You think about the coal bin, already half empty. You think about the shoes your daughter will outgrow before winter ends. You do not think about the future in years. You think about it in weeks, sometimes in days. By late afternoon, your back aches, your fingers are stiff, your ears ring from the constant pounding of the presses. Asterisk, when the foreman finally calls the end of the shift. You feel relief, but only for a moment. The walk home is long, and the evening will bring its own work. The tenement is louder now. The workers have returned. The hallways are crowded. The smell of cooking fills the air. Onions, cabbage, bread, and meat, all mingling into something heavy and inescapable. Children run up and down the stairs, their laughter echoing off the walls. A baby cries somewhere above you. A man shouts for someone to open the door in your room. The laundry still hangs, damp but cleaner than before. Your wife is peeling potatoes. Your brother is mending a pair of trousers. The children are bent over their school books, their lips moving silently as they read. You take off your coat and sit. Your hands are still stained with ink. You rub them with a rag, but the black smudges remain. Outside the window, the street Lamps are being lit. The glow is soft, almost golden, but it does not reach far. Shadows gather in the alleys. The city feels smaller at night, as if the darkness presses in from all sides. You eat dinner, potatoes, bread, and a thin stew. It is enough to fill your stomach, but not enough to make you forget the hunger that will return before morning. Afterward, you help your daughter with her reading. She stumbles over the words, but she is learning. You tell her that reading will give her choices. You do not say that you wish you had been given the same. The evening is not yet over, but the day already feels long. The tenement hums with life, footsteps, voices, the clatter of dishes, the creak of beds. It is a living thing, this building. It breathes through its walls. It remembers every sound. You lie back for a moment, closing your eyes. The air is warm and heavy. The smell of coal smoke clings to your clothes. Somewhere, a clock ticks, slow, steady, unchanging. You wonder, how many more days will pass like this? How many more mornings will begin with the same sounds? How many more afternoons will end with the same ache in your back? The tenement does not answer. It only waits for the next day to begin. You were taught that afternoons are a time for rest, but this one is a continuation. What happens to a life when the hours blur into each other and the days become indistinguishable? The day has ended for the city outside, but not for the tenement. Here, night is not a curtain that falls. It is a slow seep creeping into every corner, filling the cracks between bricks and boards. The gas lamps in the street below cast a weak amber glow through your window. It is enough to see shapes, but not faces. The rest of the light comes from within: candles, oil lamps, the occasional flicker of a stove fire. The air is thicker now. The smells of the day have settled: boiled cabbage, coal smoke, damp wool, and the faint metallic temps of the pipes. It is warm, but not comfortable. The heat is uneven, pooling in some rooms, vanishing in others. You sit at the small table. Your wife mends a shirt, her needle flashing in the lamplight. Your children are already in bed, lying side by side under a single blanket. Your brother is reading a newspaper, the print smudged from too many hands. The sounds of the building are different. At night, the sharp clatter of boots is gone, replaced by the softer shuffle of slippers. The shouts from the street have faded into murmurs, but the tenement is never silent. Somewhere above, a baby cries. Somewhere below, a couple argues in low, urgent voices. From the hallway comes the creak of the stairs as someone climbs slowly, carrying the weight of the day. You step outside your door for a moment. The hallway is dim, lit by a single oil lamp mounted on the wall. Its flame wavers in the draft. The shadows it casts are long and restless. A man passes you, nodding without a word. He carries a bucket of water from the pump in the courtyard. The pump is shared by everyone in the building. At night, the water is colder, the metal handle biting at the skin. In the courtyard, the air is damp. Laundry lines crisscross overhead, heavy with clothes that will not dry until morning. The walls rise around you like cliffs, their windows glowing faintly. You can hear conversations drifting down, fragments of stories, laughter, sighs. The courtyard is the building's lung. It breathes in the day's heat and exhales it into the night. Back inside, you wash your hands and face in a basin. The water is cool, almost bracing. You dry off with a towel that smells faintly of soap and coal smoke. Your wife puts away her sewing. Your brother folds the newspaper. The children shift in their sleep, murmuring softly. You blow out the lamp. The room is swallowed by darkness, but the building remains alive. You lie down on the narrow bed. The mattress sags in the middle, pulling you toward its center. The blanket is thin, but you are used to it. Through the wall, you hear the steady rhythm of someone snoring. From the street, the distant clop of a horse's hooves echoes between buildings. Somewhere, a door slams. The sounds are not intrusive anymore. They are part of the night, part of the life you know. You think about the day that is past. It was not remarkable. It was not different from yesterday or the day before. But it was lived, and that is enough. You think about tomorrow. It will begin the same way. The pipes groaning, the floorboards creaking, the baby crying. The tenement will wake, and you will wake with it. The building settles around you. Its wooden bones creak softly. Its brick skin holds the warmth of the day. It feels, in its own way, like a living thing, one that shelters you, but also consumes. You close your eyes. The darkness is complete now. The hum of the hive is steady, almost like a lullaby. You were taught that night brings rest. But here, night is just another part of the cycle. What happens to a life when the days and nights are not separate, but one continuous hum? Story 2, The Dust of Progress. Section 1. The men who laid the lines you are standing on the edge of a prairie. In 1882, the horizon is flat, endless, and pale under a washed-out sky. The wind moves through the grass in long, slow waves. There is no sound but the wind until the hammering begins. The men are already at work. They have been since dawn. They will be until the light fades. They are rail workers, graders, spikers, tie-setters, and gandy dancers. Some are Irish immigrants, their voices thick with County Cork and Galway. Some are Chinese laborers, speaking in Cantonese and Toisanese, their words clipped and quick. Some are freedmen from the south, carrying the weight of fields they know. Longer work. Some are drifters, chasing wages from one job to the next. They do not work for glory. They work for pay, a few dollars a week, sometimes less. They work for food, for shelter, for the chance to send money home. The ground is hard. The ties are heavy. The rails are heavier still, 30 feet of steel, each weighing hundreds of pounds. The graders move ahead first, leveling the earth with shovels and picks. Behind them, men lay wooden ties in neat rows, spacing them by eye. Then the rails are lifted into place, balanced on shoulders, lowered onto the ties. The spikers follow, driving iron spikes through the rails into the wood. The sound is steady, rhythmic, a hammer striking metal over and over. It is the heartbeat of the railroad. The work is dangerous. A rail can crush a foot. A spike can glance off and split a hand. A hammer can miss its mark and break a bone. The weather is another enemy. In summer, the heat shimmers off the steel, burning hands through gloves. In winter, the wind cuts through wool and freezes the breath in your beard. There is no shelter. On the line, only the open sky, the dirt underfoot, and the rails stretching ahead. The men live in camps that move with the work. Rows of canvas tents, a cookhouse, a blacksmith's forge. The ground is always muddy, the air always smoky from the fires. Meals are simple: beans, bread, salt, pork, coffee. Sometimes there is stew, thick with potatoes. Sometimes there is nothing but bread and coffee. At night, the men sit around the fire. They talk in low voices, or not at all. Some play cards, some mend clothes, some simply stare into the flames, letting the heat soak into their bones. The railroad is not just a job. It is a moving world. It carries its own rules, its own time. The men rise with the sun and work until it sets. They measure the day not by hours, but by miles of track laid. A good day is a mile. A great day is more. You walk along the line as it grows. Behind you, the rails stretch back toward the last town. Ahead, they vanish into the grass and sky. The telegraph poles march alongside, their wires humming faintly in the wind. Messages travel faster than any train, but only where the rails have gone. The railroad is changing the country. It is shrinking. Distances, binding cities to towns, towns to farms. It is creating time zones so that trains can run on schedules instead of guesses. It is making the map smaller, but the work larger. For the men who build it, the railroad is both a lifeline and a trap. It pays enough to keep them moving, but not enough to let them stop. It offers a bed in a tent, a plate of food, and the promise of another day's work. It demands their strength, their health, and sometimes their lives. You were taught that progress is clean and inevitable. But here it is dirty, slow, and paid for in sweat. What kind of nation is built when every mile of its backbone is laid by hands that will never ride it in comfort? Before the railroad, time was local. Every town set its clocks by the sun. Noon was when the sun stood highest over the main street, and that was enough. In one town, noon might come at 12:03 by the clock of the next town over. No one cared until trains arrived. Trains needed schedules. Schedules needed agreement. Agreement needed a new kind of time. You are standing in a small station in Illinois. In 1883, the station clock says 11:47. The clock in the next town says 11:52. The train between them is supposed to leave at noon from one and arrive at 12:10 at the other. But which noon? Which 12:10? The confusion is constant. Passengers miss trains. Freight shipments are delayed. Accidents happen when two trains believe they have the same track at different times. The railroad companies decide to fix it. They divide the continent into time zones: Eastern, Central, Mountain, Pacific. Each zone is exactly 1 hour apart. The lines are drawn not by state borders, but by the needs of the rails. On November 18, 1883, at exactly noon in each zone, the clocks are reset. It is called the Day of Two Noons. In some towns, the clock jumps forward. In others, it falls back. Their time is not their own. For the rail workers, the change is practical. Schedules become reliable. The work is still hard, but the rhythm is steadier. For everyone else, it is unsettling. The sun no longer decides the hour. The railroad does. You are back on the line, watching. The telegraph operator in the camp. He sits in a small wooden shack, tapping messages in code. The sound is sharp, quick, and precise. The messages carry orders, updates, and warnings. They also carry the time. Every day, the operator receives a signal from a central clock hundreds of miles away. He adjusts his own clock to match. The camp's schedule meals, shifts, departures, follows that clock. The men begin to measure their lives in railroad time. They wake when the whistle blows. They eat when the cook rings the bell. They stop work when the foreman checks his watch and says the hour. The sun still rises and sets, but it is no longer the master. In the towns along the line, the change is visible. Shopkeepers set their clocks to match the station. School bells ring at the same minute every day. Church services begin exactly on the hour. The railroad's time seeps into every part of life. Not everyone accepts it. Some farmers keep their own clocks set to God's time, as they call it. They work by the sun, not by the whistle. They see the railroad's time as an intrusion, a reminder that the world beyond their fields is moving faster than they are. But the change is unstoppable. The rails stretch farther each month. The telegraph wires hum with messages. The schedules grow thicker, printed in neat columns of hours and minutes. The country is learning to move together, to keep step with a clock it did not choose. For the men who lay the track, the new time is both a tool and a tether. It keeps them on schedule, but it also binds them to the pace of the work. There is no drifting, no lingering. The whistle calls, and they answer. You were taught that time is natural, but here it is manufactured, measured, and enforced. What happens to a nation when its heartbeat is set not by the sun, but by steel and steam? The further west the rails stretch, the thinner the towns become. Stations are no longer brick buildings with ticket windows and benches. Sometimes they are just a platform, a telegraph pole, and a man in a coat too thin for the wind. The prairie gives way to the scrubland gives way to desert. The desert gives way to mountains. Each mile feels harder than the last. The work camps move with the line. They are built in a day and abandoned in a day. A row of tents, a cookhouse, a forge, a water barrel. When the rails move on, the camp leaves nothing but trampled earth and a few broken boards. The men grow leaner. Their clothes wear thin. Their boots split at the seams. The pay is the same, but the cost of living rises with the distance from the cities. In the high country, the air is thin. The rails must be cut into the mountainside, blasted through rock with black powder. The debris is cleared by hand, one shovel at a time. In the desert, the heat is relentless. The rails burn to the touch. Water is rationed. The men work slower, but they work. The telegraph wires follow the rails, their poles leaning slightly in the wind. Messages travel ahead of the trains, announcing their approach to towns that have never seen one before. In some places, the arrival of the first train is a celebration. In others, it is met with suspicion. The railroad brings goods, mail, and news. For others, it is the end of the world they knew. At the farthest reaches of the line, the work feels different. There is no town waiting just ahead, no station already built. The rails are pushing into places where maps are still blank. The men talk about what lies beyond: more mountains, more desert, maybe the ocean. Some dream of staying when the work is done, of claiming land and building a life. The sky gold and red. The rails stretch toward the horizon, disappearing into the distance. They look endless, but you know they will end here, or somewhere beyond. The wind carries the smell of smoke from the cookhouse. The men are gathering for supper. Tomorrow they will rise before dawn and lay another mile. The day after, another. The railroad is almost complete. When it is finished, a train will be able to cross the continent in days instead of months. It will carry passengers, freight, and the idea that America is smaller than it once was. But for the men who built it, the journey is not measured in miles or schedules. It is measured in the weight of the rails they lifted, the blisters on their hands, the nights spent in tents under strange skies. You were taught that progress is a destination, but here it is a horizon that keeps moving. What happens when the thing you build to connect the world leaves you behind? Story 3. The Butter Churn Republic. You wake in the dark. Not the soft dark of a city night, but the deep, absolute dark of the countryside. There are no street lamps here, no glow from a neighbor's window, only the faint outline of the rafters above you, and the cold air that seeps through the gaps in the walls. It is 4:30 in the morning. The rooster has not yet crowed. The farm is still, but your day has already begun. You dress quickly, pulling on a wool skirt and a heavy apron. The floorboards are cold under your feet. The stove in the kitchen is dark, the ashes from last night's fire still faintly warm. You stack kindling, strike a match, and coax the flame to life. The first task is water. You carry 2 buckets to the pump outside. The handle is stiff in the cold, the metal biting at your hands. You carry it back inside, careful not to spill. The kitchen begins to warm. You set a kettle on the stove. You mix cornmeal for porridge, bread, and coffee for the men, milk for the children. They eat quickly, speaking little. The men will head to the fields. The children will help with chores before walking to the schoolhouse. Your own work begins in the dairy shed. You milk them by hand, the rhythm steady. Squeeze, release, squeeze, release. The milk streams into the pail, warm against the chill. When the pail is full, you carry it to the kitchen. You strain the milk through a cloth, separating out the bits of straw and dust. Some will be set aside for drinking. The rest will be churned into butter. The churn is tall and wooden, the dasher worn smooth from years of use. You pour in the cream, grip the handle, and begin. Up and down, up and down. The motion is slow but relentless. Your arms ache, but you keep going. The cream thickens, clumps forming, the sound changing from slosh to thud. When the butter comes together, you lift it out, wash it in cold water, and press it into a wooden mold. The buttermilk is poured off. It will be used for baking later. This butter will not be eaten only here. It will be sold in town, traded for sugar, coffee, or cloth. It is part of the invisible economy that keeps the farm alive, the work of women, measured not in wages, but in what it makes possible. By mid-morning, the laundry is soaking in the washtub. The clothes are scrubbed against a washboard, rinsed in cold water, and wrung out by hand. They are hung on the line outside, where the wind will stiffen them before they dry. Inside, bread dough is rising near the stove. The kitchen smells of yeast and wood smoke. The floor is swept, the table wiped, the dishes washed. The work is constant, but it is not hurried. Labor is measured in hours, but here it is measured in chores, completed, in loaves baked, in butter molded. By noon, the men return from the fields for dinner, the largest meal of the day. They eat quickly, then go back to work. You clear the table, wash the dishes, and return to your own tasks. There is sewing to be done, mending to be finished, and perhaps a neighbor to visit if the weather holds. The day is far from over, but the hardest work is already behind you. The butter is cooling in the pantry, the bread is baked, the laundry is drying. The farm will keep running because you keep running. You were taught that the economy is built in banks and factories, but here it is built in kitchens and dairies, in the quiet labor that never makes the ledgers. What happens to history when the hands that kept it turning are never named? The butter you churned this morning is cool now, firm in its wooden mold. It sits on the pantry shelf beside 2 loaves of bread, a jar of pickled beans, and a basket of eggs. These are not just food, they are currency. In the 1880s countryside, money is scarce. Cash changes hands for taxes, for land, for the occasional store-bought item. But most of what keeps a household running is traded, not bought. You wrap the butter in cloth, tuck the bread into a basket, and gather the eggs in a straw-lined crate. The wagon is waiting outside, the horse shifting impatiently in the traces. The only sound is the creak of the wagon and the steady clop of hooves. The town is small, a single main street lined with wooden storefronts. There is a general store, a blacksmith, a post office, and a feed mill. The church steeple rises. Above them all, its bell marking the hours. You stop first at the general store. Shelves hold bolts of cloth, sacks of flour, jars of candy, and tins of tea. The storekeeper greets you by name. He knows what you've brought before you even open the basket. Butter, bread, eggs, all in demand. You place them on the counter. He weighs the butter, inspects the eggs, and nods. In exchange, you take a small bag of sugar, a tin of baking powder, and a length of calico for sewing. No money changes hands. The value is agreed upon without words. This is the trade table, not a piece of furniture, but a way of life. It exists in every small town, in every general store, in every handshake between neighbors. From the store, you walk to the mill. At the blacksmith's, you trade a jar of pickled beans for a repair to the wagon's harness. Each exchange is small, but together they form the invisible web that holds the community together. No one keeps a ledger, but everyone remembers who owes what. In the post office, you collect a letter from your sister in another county. She writes about her own trades: butter for lamp oil, eggs for school books, bread for a doctor's visit. Her life is different in its details, but the rhythm is the same. By midday, your basket is lighter, but your wagon is heavier. You have sugar, cloth, cornmeal, and a repaired harness. You have no more butter, but you have what you need to make more. The road home feels shorter. The horse knows the way. The sun is low, the air colder. Back in the kitchen, you store your goods. The sugar goes into a tin, the cloth into the sewing basket, the cornmeal into the bin. The harness is hung in the barn, ready for tomorrow. The butter you traded will be eaten by other families tonight. The bread will be sliced in other kitchens. The eggs will be boiled, fried, or baked into pies. Your work has left your home, but it has not left your world. This is the invisible economy, built not on coins or bills, but on trust, skill, and the steady exchange of what each person can make or grow. It is not recorded in history books, but it is what kept most households alive. You were taught that trade happens in markets and banks, but here it happens in kitchens, barns, and back doors. What happens to a community when its wealth is measured, not in money, but in the willingness to share? There is no book for it, no ink, no columns, no stamped receipts. But every woman in the county carries the same ledger, not in her hands, but in her head. She knows who brought her eggs last spring when her hens stopped laying. She knows who mended her husband's coat after the fire. She knows who still owes her a jar of blackberry preserves from last summer's picking. It is not written down, but it is remembered in the 1880s countryside. This mental ledger is as binding as any contract. It is built on trust, on reputation, and on the understanding that everyone will need help eventually. A family might be flush with potatoes one year and short of them the next. A cow might go dry, a roof might leak, a wagon wheel might break. When that happens, the ledger turns. The one who gave becomes the one who receives. You sit at the kitchen table in the late afternoon, sewing by the window. The light is fading, but you want to finish before supper. There is a knock at the door. It is your neighbor, her shawl pulled tight against the wind. She has brought you a sack of apples from her orchard. You did not ask for them, but she knows your youngest has been sick and might take comfort in something sweet. You thank her, and you know without speaking that you will repay her, not today, not tomorrow, but when the ledger calls for it. This is not charity. It is a cycle, a current that flows through the community, carrying goods, favors, and goodwill. It is also a form of insurance. When a barn burns, the neighbors arrive with hammers and saws. When a family falls ill, meals appear at their door. When a widow is left alone, her wood pile is kept full through the winter. The ledger is not perfect. There are those who take more than they give, who forget the balance, but they are remembered, too. Their names are spoken quietly, their requests met with hesitation. Reputation is currency here, and it is earned slowly, lost quickly in town. The general storekeeper keeps his own version of the ledger. He knows who pays in butter, who pays in eggs, who pays in cash. He knows who is good for their word and who is not. He extends credit sparingly, but when he does, it is because the ledger, written or unwritten, says it is safe. The children grow up watching this system work. They see their mothers trade bread for cloth, their fathers trade labor for seed. They learn that wealth is not only what you have, but what you can call upon when you need it. But change is coming. The railroad brings more goods from far away. Factories produce butter in bulk, wrapped in paper and stamped with a brand. Bread appears on shelves. Cash becomes more common, and the need for barter lessens. The ledger in the mind begins to fade. Not all at once, but slowly, as the ties between households loosen. Some mourn the loss. They say the community feels thinner, that people no longer know each other's needs. Others welcome it, glad to be free of the unspoken obligations, the quiet pressure to repay every kindness. You were taught that economies are measured in coins and bills, but here they were measured in trust, in memory, in the steady exchange of what could be made by hand. What happens to a place when the ledger in the mind is closed for good? Story 4. The Paperboy's America. The city is still half asleep. The gas lamps burn low, their light fading as the first gray of morning seeps into the streets. The air smells faintly of coal smoke and damp stone. Somewhere, a milk cart rattles over cobblestones. Somewhere else, a bakery door opens, letting out a warm breath of yeast and flour. And then the sound of running feet, quick, light, practiced. A boy rounds the corner, a canvas bag slung across his chest. The bag is heavy, with folded newspapers, their edges damp from the press. It is 1885, and the morning paper is the city's heartbeat. It arrives before most people are awake, carried by boys who know every alley, every stoop, every door that will open to take one. The boy's name doesn't matter here. There are hundreds like him. Some are orphans. Some are sons of laborers. Some sleep in boarding houses. Others in cramped rooms above shops. All of them know the streets better than the police. The papers they carry are still warm from the press. The ink smudges their fingers, stains their cuffs. The headlines shout in bold type. Strike in the Mills New Bridge opens murder on the East Side. But the paper is more than headlines. It is the classifieds, where jobs are found and rooms are rented. It is the shipping news, where merchants track their cargo. It is the society page, where the wealthy see their names in print. The boy moves quickly, tossing papers onto stoops, sliding them under doors. He knows which customers will tip at Christmas, which will complain if the paper is late, which will scold him for creased pages. He also knows the other paper boys and the invisible borders between their routes. Cross into another boy's territory, and there will be trouble. The streets are divided not by the city, but by the boys themselves. By the time the sun is fully up, the bag is lighter. The boy's pace slows. He stops at a corner to read a headline, mouthing the words silently. He cannot afford to buy a paper, but he can read the one he carries until it's delivered. This is how many paper boys learn the city's news before anyone else. They read as they walk, absorbing the names, the places, the events. They become messengers, not just of the printed word, but of the gossip that grows around it. The newspaper is not just information, it is influence. It shapes what people talk about at breakfast, what they argue about at work, what they believe about the world beyond their street. In the 1880s, the paper is the fastest way to spread news. The telegraph brings it to the newsroom, the press prints it, and the paper boys scatter it through the city like seeds. By mid-morning, the boy's route is done. He returns the empty bag to the distribution office, a cramped room that smells of ink and damp paper. Other boys are already there, swapping stories, trading routes, arguing over who sold the most extras. The extras are special, single-sheet editions, printed when something big happens. A fire, a political scandal, a sudden death. The boys shout the headlines in the street, their voices carrying over the noise of wagons and streetcars. For the boy, the paper is work. For the city, it is a mirror. It reflects its triumphs and its failures, its wealth and its poverty, its order and its chaos. You were taught that news is neutral, but here it is shaped by who prints it, who sells it, and who can afford to read it. What happens to a city when its stories are carried by children who see more than they are meant to? The press room is never truly quiet. Even before the machines start, there is a hum, the shuffle of paper, the clink of metal type, the low voices of men who have been here since before dawn. The air is thick with the smell of ink oil and damp newsprint. You step inside, and the first thing you notice is the heat. The great rotary presses give off warmth, even when idle, their steel drums gleaming under gaslight. The floor is dusted with paper scraps, the corners dark with ink stains that will never come out. At one end of the room, the compositors work at long benches. They stand over trays of metal type, each tiny block a single letter, number, or punctuation mark. Their fingers move quickly, plucking the pieces from the case and setting them into lines. The lines are locked into frames, the frames into pages. It is slow, meticulous work. One mistake, and an entire column must be reset. The men work in silence, broken only by the occasional muttered curse when a letter is dropped. They know the clock is against them. The morning edition must be ready before the paper boys arrive. In the editor's office, the air is cooler but no less tense. The editor sits at a desk piled high with proofs, telegrams, and handwritten notes. He reads quickly, marking changes in the margins with a thick pencil. A headline is shortened to fit the column. A paragraph is cut to make room for an advertisement. A name is double-checked. A misspelling could mean a lawsuit. The telegraph operator enters with a fresh strip of paper. It carries news from Chicago. A factory fire, dozens injured. The editor reads it once, twice, then calls for a compositor. The story will make the front page. Back on the pressroom floor, the foreman gives the signal. The presses begin to turn. At first, the sound is a low rumble, then a steady roar as the drums spin faster. The paper feeds through in great rolls. The ink rollers pressing the words into place. The smell of fresh ink fills the air. The printed sheets fly out in a blur, caught by boys who stack them in neat piles. The rhythm is hypnotic. The thump of the rollers, the hiss of the paper, the clank of gears. The press does not stop for long. Once the morning edition is printed, the work begins on the afternoon edition. The news changes quickly, and the paper must keep up. A speech in Washington, a ship arriving in port, a trial verdict, all can be in print within hours. In the corner, the advertising clerk works at a smaller desk. He takes orders for notices, a lost dog, a room for rent, a sale at the dry goods store. Each ad is set in type, just like the news, each one a small but vital source of income for the paper. The ads are not decoration. They are the reason the paper can afford to print at all. Without them, the price of each issue would be too high. For most readers, by mid-morning, the first stacks of papers are ready. The paper boys crowd the loading dock, their hands outstretched. They pay for their bundles in cash, each boy buying as many as he thinks he can sell. The risk is theirs. Unsold papers mean lost money. The bundles are heavy, the ink still damp. The boys sling them over their shoulders and scatter into the streets, shouting headlines as they go. Inside, the presses slow, then stop. The room is suddenly quiet, the air still heavy with heat and ink. The compositors stretch their backs, the pressmen wipe their hands on rags. The editor leans back in his chair, already thinking about the next edition. You were taught that news is made in the stories themselves. But here, it is made in the press room, in the hands that set the type, in the machines that turn ink into influence. What happens to truth when it must be shaped to fit the space between advertisements? By the time the presses have cooled, the city is already reading. On stoops, in streetcars, at kitchen tables, the paper is unfolded, scanned, and folded again. The ink is still faintly tacky, leaving smudges on fingertips and cuffs. The morning edition moves fast. In the business district, clerks read it, standing up, one hand holding the paper, the other holding a cup of coffee. In the market's stall, owners glance at the headlines between customers, In the parks, men on benches read aloud to those who cannot. The paper is not just read, it is discussed. Two men argue over a political column outside the post office. A group of women in a millinery shop whisper about a scandal reported on the society page. A streetcar conductor folds his paper neatly and tucks it under the seat, knowing the next passenger will pick it up. By noon, the morning's news has already begun to change shape. Facts are repeated, details are dropped, embellishments are added. A fire that damaged one building becomes a blaze that destroyed three. A speech that drew a polite crowd becomes one that stirred the whole city. The paper is also a marketplace. The classifieds are read as carefully as the front page. A man looking for work circles an ad for a warehouse job. A widow scans the rooms to let column, searching for something she can afford. A young couple reads the lost and found section, hoping for word of their missing dog. In the saloons, the paper is passed from hand to hand. The bartender reads the sports scores aloud. A man at the end of the bar traces the stock prices with his finger. Someone folds the paper into a neat square and slips it into his coat pocket, not to read again, but to show someone later. By late afternoon, the afternoon edition appears. The headlines are different now. A trial verdict, a ship docking early, a sudden storm on the coast. The paperboys shout the news in the streets, their voices carrying over the clatter of wagons and the hiss of steam from streetcar brakes. Some people buy both editions. Others choose one, depending on when they have time to read. Either way, the paper becomes part of the day's rhythm, as expected as the tolling of the church bell or the lighting of the gas lamps. Not everyone reads the paper themselves. In boarding houses, one person reads aloud to the rest. In factories, a foreman might pin a page to the wall for the workers to see. In tenements, a single copy might pass through a dozen hands before the day is done. By evening, the paper has begun its final transformation. It lines drawers, wraps parcels, and cushions fragile goods. It is folded into kindling for the stove, or crumpled to clean windows. Children cut out the illustrations, pasting them into scrapbooks. The news itself fades quickly. Tomorrow, new headlines will replace today's, but the paper's physical life will linger in cupboards, in trunks, in the corners of kitchens. The city in print is not just the city as it is. It is the city as it wants to be seen, as it fears to be seen, as it imagines itself. It is a mirror, but a mirror that can choose what to reflect. You were taught that history is written in books, but here it is written in columns that will be gone by morning. What happens to a city when its memory is printed on paper meant to be thrown away? Story 5. The silent classroom. The day begins before the sun. The frost is still on the grass, the air sharp enough to sting your nose. You pull on your boots, wrap a scarf around your neck, and step out into the pale light of morning. The road to school is not paved. It is a dirt track, rutted from wagon wheels, frozen hard in winter, muddy in spring. You walk it every day, carrying a slate, a piece of chalk, and a few books wrapped in cloth to keep them dry. Some children walk alone. Others join in small groups, their voices low, their breath visible in the cold air. The older ones carry lunch. Pails, bread, cheese, maybe an apple if the season is right. The younger ones carry nothing but their lessons in their heads. The schoolhouse comes into view, a small, square building with a pitched roof and a single chimney. It stands alone, surrounded by fields. There is no fence, no playground, just a patch of bare earth where the grass has been worn away by years of footsteps. The bell hangs in a small frame above the door. It will ring soon, calling everyone inside. Until then, the children linger, stamping their feet to keep warm, whispering to each other in the thin morning light. Inside, the air smells of wood smoke and chalk dust. The stove in the corner is already burning, its iron sides radiating heat. The desks are arranged in neat rows, each one carved with initials from years past. The blackboard takes up most of the front wall, its surface dark and smooth, waiting for the day's lessons. The teacher stands at the desk, arranging papers, checking the attendance book. She is young, but her posture is straight, her voice firm. In this room, she is the law. The bell rings. The children file in, removing their coats and scarves, hanging them on pegs along the wall. They take their seats without speaking. The room falls silent except for the sound of the teacher's footsteps. The day begins with recitation. The older students stand and recite passages from memory, poetry, scripture, historical speeches. The younger ones repeat the alphabet, their voices rising and falling together. There are no grades here, no separate classrooms. All ages learn together, from the smallest child just learning to read to the oldest boy preparing to leave for work. On the farm, spelling lists and maps drawn in chalk. The students copy them onto their slates, erasing mistakes with a damp rag. Paper is too precious to waste on practice. Discipline is strict. A child who speaks out of turn may be made to stand at the front of the room. One who forgets a lesson might write it out 10 times before being allowed to go home. Serious misbehavior can mean a switch across the knuckles, not often, but enough to be remembered. The teacher's voice is the only one that carries across the room. The rest is the scratch of chalk, the rustle of pages, the occasional cough dot. At mid-morning, there is a short recess. The children spill outside, their voices suddenly loud after hours of quiet. They run, play tag, throw snowballs in winter, or skip stones in the warmer months. The teacher watches from the doorway, arms folded against the cold. When the bell rings again, the noise stops as quickly as it began. The children return to their seats, cheeks flushed, hair damp with sweat or snow. The lessons continue. Geography, history, penmanship, maps are studied, rivers traced with a finger, capitals memorized. Dates are recited until they stick in. The mind like nails in wood. The teacher moves from desk to desk, checking work, correcting mistakes, offering a quiet word of praise or a sharper word of warning. Her authority is unquestioned. You were taught that learning is about curiosity, but here it is about discipline, repetition, and the slow accumulation of facts. What happens to a mind when knowledge is measured not in ideas, but in how well it can be repeated? The morning recitations are over, but the day is far from done. The stove in the corner glows red, its heat reaching only the nearest desks. Those by the windows keep their coats on, their breath faint in the cold air. The teacher moves to the blackboard, chalk in hand. She writes a column of numbers, her script neat and deliberate. The older students copy them onto their slates, beginning long division problems that will take the better part of an hour. The younger ones trace letters, their small hands clumsy, but determined. The room is a patchwork of lessons. One child is memorizing the capitals of every state. Another is reading aloud from a history primer, stumbling over the names of battles. In the back, a boy is sketching the outline of the Mississippi River from memory, his tongue caught between his teeth in concentration. The teacher moves among them, bending to check a sum, straightening to correct a spelling. Her voice is low, but firm. She praises sparingly, corrects quickly, and expects the work to be redone without complaint. At midday, the lunch bell rings. There is no cafeteria, only the same desks, now holding tin pails and wrapped parcels. The smell of bread, cheese, and cold meat fills the room. Some children trade bites, others eat quickly and slip outside for a few minutes of play. The teacher eats at her desk, a sandwich wrapped in cloth, a small apple beside it. She keeps one eye on the clock and the other on the children outside. Their shouts carrying through the open door. The afternoon lessons begin with reading. The older students take turns reading aloud from the McGuffey reader, their voices steady but flat. The younger ones follow along, whispering the words under their breath. When a mistake is made, the teacher corrects it immediately, the rhythm of the reading never breaking. After reading comes penmanship. The students dip their pens into inkwells set into the desks, the nibs scratching across the paper. Ink blots are frowned upon, smudges even more so. The letters must be even, the loops graceful, the spacing exact. Geography follows. The teacher unrolls a large wall map, its edges frayed from years of use. She points to rivers, mountains, and cities, calling on students to name them. Some answer confidently, others hesitate, their eyes darting to the map. For clues, history comes next, dates, names, and events recited in order. The emphasis is on accuracy, not interpretation. The past is presented as a series of facts to be learned, not questions to be asked. The hours pass slowly. The light through the windows shifts from white to gold, then begins to fade. The stove is fed one last time, the warmth a comfort against the creeping chill. The final lesson of the day is arithmetic drills. The teacher calls out problems. The students answer in unison. The rhythm is steady, almost like a chant. It is not meant to be exciting. It is meant to be remembered. As the last problems are solved, the teacher closes the attendance book. The children put away their slates, wipe them clean, and gather their coats. The bell rings one final time, and the room empties in a rush of boots and laughter. The teacher remains behind, erasing the blackboard, stacking books, and banking the stove for the night. Tomorrow will be much the same lessons, the same order, the same quiet discipline. You were taught that education is about inspiration, but here it is about structure, repetition, and the steady shaping of habits. What happens to curiosity when it is trained to sit in straight rows and speak only when the final clang of the bell is sharp in the cold air? It echoes across the yard, over the bare trees, and down the dirt road that winds toward the farms. The children spill out of the schoolhouse in a rush, boots thudding, scarves flapping, voices rising after a day of restraint. For a few minutes, the yard is chaos. Snow is kicked into the air, hats are snatched and chased, and someone dares to slide across the frozen pump trough. But the teacher's presence at the doorway keeps the noise from tipping into disorder. Her gaze is enough to remind them that the day's discipline is not entirely over. The walk home is long for some, short for others. They travel in small groups, the older ones keeping an eye on the younger. The road is rutted and icy, the fields on either side lying quiet under a thin crust of snow. They talk about the lessons, but only in passing. More often, they speak of chores waiting at home, or the promise of a sleigh ride on the weekend at the first farmhouse. Two sisters turn off, their pails swinging. They will fetch water before dark, then help their mother with supper. At the next lane, a boy leaves the group, heading toward the barn where his father is already at work. By the time the last child reaches his gate, the road is empty again. The sound of the bell only a memory. Inside the homes, the day's learning is not set aside. A girl recites her spelling words to her mother while peeling potatoes. A boy works through his arithmetic problems by lamplight, his father checking the answers against a tattered book. The discipline of the classroom seeps into the rhythm of the household, the expectation that work is done before rest, that tasks are completed without complaint. For the teacher, the day is not yet over. She walks the short distance to her boarding room, the cold biting at her cheeks. There, she spreads the day's slates and copybooks across a small table. She marks errors, notes who needs extra practice, and plans the next day's lessons. Her handwriting is as neat as she demands from her students, the loops and lines precise in the quiet of the evening. The schoolhouse stands dark against the snow. Inside, the stove is cold, the desks empty, the blackboard clean. But the order of the day lingers in the memorized dates, the careful pen strokes, the habit of sitting still and listening. Years later, the students will remember the silence of that room. Some will recall it with fondness, others with a shiver. They will remember the way the teacher's eyes could still them mid-whisper, the way the lessons came in steady, measured steps, and they will carry that discipline, for better or worse, into the fields, the shops, the kitchens, and the lives they build. The bell rings only twice a day, but its echo shapes the hours far beyond the schoolyard called upon. Story 6. The yard between bells, the schoolyard, is not fenced, but everyone knows its borders. Beyond the pump, the ground dips past the woodpile. The teacher's window has a clear view, a place for careful games, not mischief. The rest is open ground, packed dirt in summer, churned mud in spring, and now in winter. A crust of snow that crunches under boots. When the bell releases them, the children scatter like startled birds. Some head for the pump to break the ice and take a drink. Others to the far corner where snowballs are already being rolled. The older boys claim the center of the yard for a rough game of Duran chase. The younger ones hover at the edges, watching, waiting for a gap to join in. There are no written rules here, but everyone knows them. You don't throw snow at the teacher's coat. You don't cut through the older boy's game unless you're ready to be tackled. If you start a snowball fight, you'd better be ready to finish it, or run fast enough to avoid the consequences. The teacher watches from the doorway, arms folded against the cold. She intervenes only when the noise sharpens into something dangerous, a cry that's more pain than play, a scuffle that doesn't break apart on its own. Otherwise, she lets the yard govern itself. It is a different kind of education, one she does not teach but understands well in the far corner. Two girls are building a snow fort. They work quietly, packing the walls higher, their gloves stiff with ice. They don't invite others to join, but they don't chase them away either. The fort will stand until the next recess, when someone will inevitably test its strength. A boy with a red scarf stands alone near the pump. He is new to the school, still learning the rhythms of the yard. He watches the games, the alliances, the unspoken signals. He will not join today, but by spring he will know where he belongs. The bell rings again, sharp and final. The games break apart instantly. Snowballs are dropped, forts abandoned, and the children file back inside, their boots leaving wet trails on the floorboards. The yard falls silent, but its rules remain, waiting for the next time the bell sets them free. The yard may look like chaos to an outsider, but to those who live in it every day, it's a map of invisible borders and shifting power. Every recess redraws the lines, but some patterns hold. The older boys are the undisputed rulers of the center ground. They decide what game is played there, usually something fast, loud, and physical. If you want in, you have to prove yourself. Run hard, take a fall without complaint, and never flinch when the ball or snowball comes your way. Those who can't keep up drift to the edges, where the games are slower and the rules looser. The girls' domain is more fluid. Some join the central games, darting in and out with quick bursts of speed. Others form tight circles near the school wall, talking in low voices, their laughter sharp and sudden. They are not immune to the hierarchy. The ones with the best stories or the boldest dares draw the most attention. The youngest children orbit the older ones like small moons. They watch, imitate, and occasionally get pulled into a game, usually as a helper or a target. It's a rough apprenticeship, but it's how they learn the unspoken rules. Don't cry unless you're truly hurt. Don't tattle unless it's serious. And never, ever interrupt a game in progress. There are leaders, but they don't wear crowns. Their authority comes from speed, strength, wit, or the ability to make others laugh. A single well-timed joke can shift the balance of the yard, just as a single mistake can knock someone down the ladder. The teacher sees all this from the doorway. She knows who holds sway, who is on the rise, and who is slipping. She steps in only when the balance tips too far, when a game turns into a fight, or when someone is pushed too far to the margins. Her interventions are rare but decisive, and the yard adjusts quickly afterward. By the end of winter, the hierarchy is as solid as the ice on the pump trough. Everyone knows their place, and the games run smoothly until spring comes, melting the snow, and with it, the old order. The first sign of spring is not the buds on the trees, but the sound of water dripping from the schoolhouse eaves. The snowbanks shrink day by day, leaving behind patches of brown grass and slick mud. The pump trough thaws, the ice breaking into jagged shards that clink against the wood. The yard feels bigger now. Without the snow to slow them, the children run farther, faster. The games change. Snowball fights give way to tag, to races, to games that spill beyond the invisible borders of winter. The older boys still claim the center, but their grip is looser. Speed matters more than bulk now, and some of the smaller, quicker children begin to challenge the old order. The girls' circles break apart, scattering into the open space. Some join the races, their braids flying behind them. Others invent new games with sticks and stones, marking out territories in the dirt. The fort builders of winter become the architects of elaborate chalk maps, their borders shifting with each bell. The youngest children, freed from the heavy boots and stiff coats of winter, move more boldly. They dart into games they would have avoided before, testing their speed, their nerves. Sometimes they win, sometimes they are chased out, but each attempt changes the yard's balance.